Thanks, Lisa. So I'll start this, and just before I do go any further, it's actually Dr. Tom Wegener, who has started out his career in law and converted to the dark side of surfboard shaping from his law degree. And most recently has just completed his PhD up at the University of the Sunshine Coast. So I'll get on to Tom in a moment. And can I also just recognise in the front row here, Justice Nicholas Kirawam, who's a Supreme Court judge from Papua New Guinea, who's here at Bond doing some refresher study with our law school. And Justice Kirawam is actually the patron of Tupira Surf Club and the tribal chief of the local area of Tupira Surf Club, where a lot of what I'm going to talk about takes place, or a lot of what we're going to talk about takes place. And it's through his generosity and vision that a lot of this has actually happened. So I'll get on with the show and just sort of set the scene firstly about the background here. So the background is around surfing, the sport of surfing, board riding and surf tourism. So surfing and travel, a lot of you will be familiar with the fact that surfers like to travel. They like to get away from crowded places like the Gold Coast and go to remote places that are uncrowded where they can enjoy a surfing experience that's unfettered by having to compete for waves, and they can also enjoy a unique cultural experience. So a lot of the surf tourism in the world takes place in remote corners of developing countries such as Indonesia, the Maldives, South Pacific Islands, and most recently Papua New Guinea, our nearest international neighbour. I've been involved in quite a bit of research around this phenomenon with a colleague from University of San Diego State University, sorry, named Jess Ponting. And that research has been based in South Pacific nations, Fiji, in Indonesia, and again in Papua New Guinea. And the prevailing business model in surf tourism is where the operation is owned largely by Australian and US and mostly Western expats, and all of the profits typically come back to their home nations. Very little stays and is reticulated back to the local communities. And that's really been the main characteristic of surf tourism operations in developing countries. So that's a problem because you're locking out basically the local communities who own the resources, who are the custodians of these nature-based resources upon which we're relying. So take that to Papua New Guinea, and they've taken a very unique approach where through, again, the incredible vision of a gentleman by the name of Andrew Abel, who's the president of the Surfing Association of Papua New Guinea and has been since 1995, he saw what was going on in other countries and he said, no, we don't want that happening here in Papua New Guinea. So what they've come up with in Papua New Guinea is unique. It's not done anywhere else in the world. They have surf management plans where the country is divided into 5 different surf zones. And in each zone, it's regulated by a regional surfing alliance. And in that alliance, the local tribes, elders, and decision-making authorities in the local communities are broached by Andy and the Surfing Association. They go to them and say, look, here's a sport that you can all participate in. You have incredible resources out the front. They identify the surfing resources and they explain to them what can happen, what they can do with it. They show them the sport of surfing. So if the community says so and says yes, they set up an operation. But in order to set up a commercial operation, first or concurrently, they have to have surfing participation. So a surfing club is built and run by the locals with the help of the Surfing Association. So they cap visitation to usually between 15 and 20 surfers per day per area. There's a levy put on each visiting surfer when they arrive, and up front the equivalent of 50 Australian dollars goes to the Surfing Association, and then it's between $10 and $20 per day gets reticulated back to the local community, where they use that money for aid stations, education, water reticulation projects, and so on, whatever's needed in the local community. So that's the background to this study. Major problem, though, is the availability of surfboards. So you want to get these kids involved in surfing, but there's no surfboards. So, looking to the past to shape the future. What we have out the front here is what's called a splinter. In Papua New Guinea, Melanesians, well, not just in Papua New Guinea, but the Melanesian culture have been riding splinters, offcuts from canoes, appropriately shaped bits of wood. They've gone out and ridden them in the surf. So there is a cultural precedence of surfing in Melanesian culture. So the question then is, well, with all these surf tourists coming in and locals seeing all these modern incarnations of surfboards, what if we could somehow combine traditional splinter construction with modern surfboard construction? So enter master surfboard shaper Tom Wegener. So in 2016, at the invitation of Tupura Surf Club manager Nicky Winnichuk, Tom went up to Tupura Surf Club, which is on the northern side of the mainland in Papua New Guinea. And as I said, Justice Kirawan is the tribal chief of the Tupura area, Ulingan Bay area. And what Tom did was take his expertise in wooden surfboard construction, and by the way, I've done Tom massive injustice here, because for those of you who know surfing, Tom is actually a global figure who has shaped the sport. There's been a whole resurgence internationally around wooden surfboards and finless surfboards, going back to the ancient Hawaiian traditions. And Tom has actually been the spearhead of that internationally. There are books written about, or he's written a book about his own experience. He's been in multiple movies, videos, and everything. But anyway, so I'll hand over to Tom now and to talk about what has transpired in Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
Around can we build it?
Can we build it? Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks to Danny O'Brien and Jess Ponting, because while I was studying, I was reading their understanding of surf travel, and that kind of set me up with the framework of mind to think, okay, here we go, we're going to go into this situation, and we want to implement your 5-point plan. I forget what it's called. Anyways, yeah, that's it. Plan. And so it set our way of thinking right away. And then going there, Nicholas and the locals had left us huge stacks of wood, enormous piles of wood, and some basic tools to cut them up and to try to figure out how we could make surfboards from this. And we were bouncing all the ideas around, whether we could glass them together, we could bring in foam, we could use fiberglass, there's epoxies, all the different ways you can do it. And what seemed to work best is if we stuck with what they already do, because I look at this surfboard and it's really not that far off from what the ancient Hawaiians were riding and what people had been surfing for thousands and thousands of years now. So the idea was to take what they're already doing and reform it a bit into a better surfboard. And so the key was all the balsa wood. Oh, there we go. Can we just keep switching? Yeah, look at that. So there's lots of balsa wood there, and we found that I was thinking, well, if we could mill this balsa wood up, we already have the stuff here, the wood. Why don't we use this? It's locally grown. The last trip it was Nicholas who said, look, we need a big balsa wood tree, and one had fallen over, and this tree was this big and as straight as an arrow. And I said, well, yeah, we'll chop that up. So Nicholas had the locals out there carving it up, and then the next time I went up, I brought a surfacer. And the surfacer is the one tool that they need to glue the boards together. You can see here, there's a surfboard, and all the boards back there. It's very hard to make a flat piece of wood from a big tree, because the wood's softer in the middle and harder on the rails and on the outside. So when you cut a surfboard out of a solid tree trunk, just like they did in the surfing movie with the penguins, and Surf's Up, that actually, it doesn't work that well because the wood splits. So it's much better to chop the wood up, dry it. So they chopped up the wood into lots of pieces. The second trip up, we brought the surfacer, ran it through, so we had two perfectly flat sides that we could glue. And the glue is there's glue all over the place. It's not that hard to find glues to put that together, and then all of a sudden we had a dried, very light piece of balsa wood, which would be worth a fortune here, and then up there we were just making them, willy-nilly. It was just remarkable. And so we were making these boards, and we ran into issues, for example, how to seal them, because balsa wood is like a sponge, it sucks up water. And so we started looking for ways to make them so they would float better, ride better. And we got to that point where sourced a Papua New Guinean way of getting big drums of a varnish that worked good enough. It worked just good enough for these boards. And so the kids were surfing them. And the thing is, a foam surfboard is very, very easy to ride, and even a balsa wood surfboard that we're shaping like that, even this balsa, and we would love it down here, is still pretty heavy to ride. It doesn't really, the fins are not modern fins. It's still a distant cry from a foam surfboard that the pros are riding. So the next very lucky thing is that we had all these pros come up, and that the World Surf League had a longboard contest there. And when the pros got there, they started riding the locally made boards, and then we had an impromptu contest where we'd match up a local kid with an international surfer. They'd paddle out together, and they'd surf together. And what the great expanding thing was...
I'll just interject here. For the very first time last year, Tupira Surf Club that we're talking about actually hosted a world championship. So this is the first time ever in Papua New Guinea that the World Surf League had held an event. So for them to have it here in this, it's a small village. People walked for 2 days, Nicholas, to get there to watch this. You'll see some of the crowd shortly. But these are the world's elite men's and women's had descended on this village, little village, to hold this event. So these kids, and people got to see these men and women surfing incredibly, better than any of the surf tourists they'd ever seen there. And what Tom's saying is that they held an event where, a mini event within the event, where they just rode the wooden boards that they had made. So all of a sudden, the locals got to see, wow, these things actually do work. It's us.
Yeah. You watch the local kids, and they surf them okay. Like this is world champion Harley Ingleby with some of the boards that they'd made, and of course the locals in the surf house that Nicholas and the local group had made a house nearly the size of this room here, beautiful thatched hut, just to make the wood surfboards. And so when the contest was announced, the whole community just went wild, making these beautiful surfboards, put in this incredible artwork on them. But still, I felt that they had a doubt in their mind, like, we know this is beautiful, but does it really compare with a modern surfboard? Or are we just teasing? Is this an industry that can carry on, or are we just making something for the fun of it right now that's going to disappear? Probably there's lots of things that are maybe like that, like drums or whatever, that they can make locally, but there's not really an industry for them. Well, and they second guess themselves, saying, we don't ride our boards really good. We don't surf like the pros do. The pros paddle out, and they surf these boards so good, so convincingly, that I was just with the local kids, and their mouths are just dropping. And then they get to paddle out with the pros, and the pros are surfing so well that I felt as though it was clear that it confirmed that they're actually were on an industry. They were making surfboards that have value, and that tourists will definitely buy. And one of those boards that was just there, well, you can see the crowds on the beaches here when the local Papua New Guineans came and saw their own surfboards being surfed so well, not only by the locals but by the pros as well. And seeing that, yes, this is actually a legitimate industry that we've created here.
And the other side of that is that these were people from all over, up and down the coast, and unbeknownst to them at the time, or maybe known to them, but possibly not recognised, was the resources right out in front of them. They saw that and thought, wow, we've got waves breaking out in front of our place. So Nicholas will maybe answer some questions a bit later, but those communities are realising, wow, we can set up an operation here as well. So they're looking at this thinking, here's opportunities for us. Meanwhile, in Papua New Guinea, the sporting opportunities for men and women are not always equal, putting it nicely. So one of the things that they've done really well in Tupira, and through, again, the vision of Andy Abel and people such as Nicholas, is that they've instituted policies to make sure that girls have equal access to boys to the surfboards, because they're all community-owned boards. They're not individually owned boards. They're there for the community, and first person in gets it. So you see little kids walking around with leg ropes on their wrist. They go to school with leg ropes on so that when they get back, they just run and grab their board that they want before anyone else gets it. But what they saw when the professionals were there was the women treated absolutely equally to the men and performing on an equal stage to the men. So for the girls to see this, combined with the program that Andy Abel has put in place called the Pink Nose Revolution, where 50% of all the community boards are for the girls. So adding that program to what they're seeing here just elevated the whole impact of the wooden board intervention.
So in the end, Andy Abel said all contests, all big contests within Papua New Guinea will always have a wood board division, a locally made wood board division within the contest framework. So now it's in that professional framework of Papua New Guinea to hold these because they saw the value, and they're not just little kids' toys; they're the real deal.
Did you want to talk about it? So part of this was that the challenge now is to, Tom's here, he's not there anymore. So how do we embed the knowledge there in the communities and in Tapira specifically here, so that it continues on, and they can continue the equal access to surfboards, and there's not a shortage of them, and that they can see it as a new revenue stream. Think about it, it's a fantastic souvenir. If you're a surf tourist going to Papua New Guinea, imagine bringing home one of these beautiful bolster boards. So to embed the worth of these wooden boards, they've actually started a day of the week is dedicated just to riding wooden boards. It's called Namokwa Day. And every Sunday of every week, you just ride wooden boards. A lot of them choose to ride the wooden boards every day of the week, but Sunday, if you want to surf at Tapira, you ride wooden boards. And it's embedding it.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and it's embedding this culture of making your own wood boards and keeping the front of the surf club hopefully full of wood surfboards for sale, and also maybe spreading the word out as well. Keeping that culture alive. Here's the shed right here that Nicholas had made for that. And it gives a lot of respect to the art. And here's all the boards that the kids and locals and grown-ups had made. And now 2 permanent positions are at the surf club, making surfboards to artisans. And the surf club, it's hard to actually explain how important the surf club is to this area where the agriculture has been falling down as the palm trees are getting old. They've had lots of problems with the local cash crops, where the waves are the ultimate resource, as they just keep coming in for free. They come in 24/7, all day long. Why don't we charge, basically $10 for every wave that's surfed? And then, there's no overhead. It's incredible. It's a great situation. And then you can see, the other thing is the kids there, as they put on their local wear, the feathers and that beautiful local clothing, you could just see how stoked they were. And you could see the pros in the background here all taking photos of the kids walking along with the boards. Usually it's the other way around.
So these are all globally seasoned professional surfers actually taking photos of the kids rather than the normal situation, which is the other way around.
Yeah, so it looks like it's going to be around for a while. And they're no longer toys. They are actually real tools for surfing waves, for sale and for promoting tourism.
So there's shared cultural foundations, there's more people getting to surf, boys and girls. The cottage industry is starting to evolve where, they're seeing, people actually value these. Tom was just telling me, one of the Brazilians was given one of the Brazilian professionals was given one of these boards, and he almost cried. And the community saw that and went, wow. So this guy, this global professional, puts that much value on what we've produced, and the value of those little moments is priceless. I think that's it.
I think it's one more just point that we talked about out there is how warmly, because it's a community-based business, that the entire community was so behind the surfers coming, and none of the surfers had ever felt so warmly embraced by a place where they went for a professional contest. They had never felt so warmly invited in, but they actually were. They were invited into the home of these people, they could really feel it. They really felt the hospitality on a different level than a normal surf camp, for sure.
That's us. Thank you.